Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. For our final segment of the day, we were just talking about some financials in the MLB with the Yankees, but I want to sort of tie that into some conversations about contract extensions that are coming up for the biggest quarterbacks in the NFL. There's a list of a few coming off of this Jared Goff deal that just got done. We also have Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Tua, and Dak all eligible as well. So I want to start the conversation with Trevor Lawrence, who in my eyes is the biggest no-brainer for the Jaguars to go out and make this deal. Earlier in the week, Doug Peterson spoke to the media, and he talked about that he expects the deal to get done soon. Trevor Lawrence he's had his ups and downs, I would say. Last year, the injuries definitely came into play during the final part of the season, and for as much love as we give Trevor Lawrence, and I'm definitely included in that, do have to acknowledge the fact that he has won one playoff game up to this point. Now, his rookie season was obviously a disaster with Urban Meyer at head coach. They go out and get him some weapons, and he ends up leading, a win and another close game in the 2023 playoffs. But I think that ultimately, Lawrence, again, he's kind of a no-brainer here. Now, the pressure and expectations on Trevor Lawrence have been there since he was named basically the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. So the money that he gets isn't going to necessarily amplify that, even though he is looking at a $50 million deal, joining Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Jared Goff as the only quarterbacks in the league to be making that type of average value money. And, Trevor Lawrence, again, I am very high on myself. I can also acknowledge the fact that it seems like in some of these types of instances, even if you go back to the 2022-23 season, Trevor Lawrence had a do-or-die game against the Tennessee Titans in Week 17. Now, they end up winning that, which helps them go to the playoffs where they pull off that improbable comeback against the Chargers. But that wasn't a great game from Trevor Lawrence either, where he was sort of airmailing a number of throws during that moment. And that was coming off of some incredible comebacks in the fourth quarters throughout that season. Had one against the Ravens, had one against the Cowboys. So there's a lot to feel good about, but also at that same time, it does seem like he hasn't necessarily fully unlocked that level that we were expecting him to be at already. And I'm somebody that I feel like I have far more patience than the average viewer in terms of sort of, evaluating somebody and the quarterback position especially. Now, listen, I understand that sometimes a burnt product is just a burnt product, but it's almost weird where Trevor Lawrence is sort of treading water right now because nobody thinks that he's a bust, especially considering the fact that all of the other quarterbacks in the first round of his draft are with new teams, including Mac Jones, who's actually his backup quarterback now. But he's not a consensus top 10 quarterback right now either, and he shouldn't be. I still have a lot of faith in him in the long term, but, it's going to be interesting, especially coming into this next contract, that's where he's going to really be evaluated, and just not sure how it's necessarily going to play out just yet. The Jaguars have tons of talent around him, so at least we have to see a more efficient Jaguars offense for this upcoming season. And I think that Lawrence can sort of carry that load, but let me know in the comments section whether or not you agree. Next player on the list here, Jordan Love. He is probably in that same conversation with Trevor Lawrence almost, where we've seen a lot less of Love, which could be a little bit of a holdback, but at the same time, if you're the Packers, you have this extremely young roster. I'd go out and get this deal done sooner rather than later, and sort of, it's kind of rolling the dice, but I think we know what we have in Jordan Love. I think that everybody's already sort of shooing him in to be the unquestioned next franchise quarterback. I think that is what he's headed for, but it also wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world to me if we do see a level of regression. It took him some time last year to adjust to NFL defenses, and then he did, and he stepped up in a big way. Obviously, take what you will with the second half of the 49ers game in the playoffs. We know that he wasn't good. But I do think that this is the right decision for them to make this kind of a deal. Now, $50 million definitely has me a little nervous, but if Jared Goff can make $50 million, I think trying to, again, especially considering the situation the Packers are in, they're not wrapped up into too many players financially. You try and make it happen. You get that price done earlier rather than later when you know that it is only going to become more expensive as time goes on. But Tua Tagovailoa is somebody that I think is an incredibly hard person to sort of evaluate here, because I'm not really bought in on him in terms of being a guy that can go out and be the reason that you win playoff games. He's in a very quarterback-friendly system. He has tons of weapons around him, both in wide receivers and running backs. And I think that if I'm the Dolphins, I would be willing to sort of play this out a little bit longer, because the difference, and I'll just sort of tie this into the next quarterback in conversation, and Dak Prescott, there isn't really a backup plan for the Cowboys without Dak Prescott, unless you believe that Trey Lance could potentially be something. But I don't think that the infrastructure of that offense is at a level where they can sort of afford to just kick it with a backup QB and assume that they can still win games, where the Dolphins, without Tua in the 2023 playoffs, were able to be competitive with the Buffalo Bills with Skylar Thompson at QB. And obviously you don't want to operate under that fully, but I would definitely have my hesitations about paying Tua that much money. Now, there are some stories that have come out in the offseason that he's been trying to work on his mobility, which I think is a huge thing for him, being able to not necessarily be a huge threat running downfield, but I think that he can really be knocked off his spot, and for good reason, considering the injury history with him, especially the stretch of concussions that he dealt with during the 2022-23 season. But I don't think he handles pressure very well. So if he can get better at evading, we can see the arm talent is sort of meh in my eyes, and I haven't necessarily seen him at the pro level yet be able to come up in these big spots, where I watched Will Levis, and obviously, national TV tax obviously gets maybe a little bit of unfair love, but I saw Will Levis granted Tyreek Hill was dealing with injuries in that game, but Will Levis with a debatably probably less talented wide receiver core be able to put together this fourth quarter comeback, and Tua on the other end was not able to step up to the challenge. So I would have a lot of doubts sort of putting all of my faith in fully handing the keys over to Tua, but let me know if you think I'm off base on that. I think, again, Tua's a solid quarterback, but when you're talking about paying a guy $50 million, listen, I know I just said Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, they're not unquestionable entities, but I still would. Tua, I would have a lot more reservations with. Worst case, you franchise tag him after this upcoming season and sort of play it out from there. But I would try, and when you still have the weapons that you do in Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and that backfield, I would try and sort of make sure that Tua is going to be your answer. And listen, if you want to take that same strategy with Jordan Love, then you can. But I think that I've seen higher end stuff from Jordan Love than I have in Tua in significantly less playing time. And that takes us to Dak Prescott, who, listen, I understand the flaws with him, but I also do think that he is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. The Cowboys don't have the luxury of having this awesome, system around him, both from a personnel and a schematic standpoint, Mike McCarthy is probably out if the Cowboys have another disappointing postseason run. So I would probably lean towards paying him. And the Cowboys, I don't think there is an easy fix with them. So there's more steps to this process. I would definitely consider it if you also feel like he is Kirk Cousins, which is a pretty accurate comparison, and that the Cowboys aren't going to be in a place where they can be contenders anytime soon. If you got to let him walk, you got to let him walk, but I don't think that there is a world where the Cowboys can afford to let him go and still have the expectations of being a Super Bowl competitive team. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments section. That is all we have time for today, though. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Have yourselves a great weekend. We will be back Monday afternoon, 2 o'clock Eastern. I know a lot of you have the long weekend, so be sure to tune in and take care. We will see you then.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to